Ghislain Perdium, the eldest son of Count Perdium, was often seen as a worthless individual, overshadowed by his reputation. Known for his uncontrollable nature, he was a reclusive sword master who spent most of his time locked away in his room, often labeled as insane. This man was Ghislain Perdium. In the midst of turmoil, a knight in armor writhed in pain, struggling to accept his defeat at the hands of Ghislain, whom he regarded as nothing more than trash. It was unfathomable to him that, as the top knight in the north, he had been defeated by someone so reviled. Scattered around him were the lifeless forms of others who had met the same fate. As the wounded knight trembled, another figure approached, a man in fine armor wielding a large axe. He asked the knight if he liked the scene around him, mentioning the significant cost he had incurred to set the traps, his tone cold and detached. His icy stare fixed on the injured knight as he inquired if the place suited him. Infuriated, the knight struggled to accept that someone like Ghislain, whom he considered a worthless scoundrel, could devise such a plan. Through gritted teeth, he demanded to know if Ghislain had anticipated his strategy. Ghislain stepped closer, his expression unwavering, and revealed that he had foreseen every detail. He spoke of knowing the enemy's numbers, the identities of their spies, and even the source of their reinforcements. With a chilling calmness, he informed the knight that every move had played into his hands. Overwhelmed by this revelation, the knight found it hard to comprehend the truth. He raised his voice, claiming he always had a hidden advantage, and questioned how someone as insignificant as Ghislain could achieve such a victory. Before the knight could finish, Ghislain silenced him with a kick to the face, commanding him to stop talking. Removing his helmet, Ghislain expressed his determination to not only win this war, but also every future conflict. He then inquired if the knight understood why victory was inevitable. With a smile, Ghislain confidently replied that he possessed all the necessary plans for success. The story then shifted back a year to a soldier's camp in the Lithuania kingdom, near Perdium estate. Inside one of the tents, Ghislain suddenly woke up, astonished to find himself alive. He instinctively touched his neck to confirm his survival. His thoughts raced as he recalled the events that had just transpired in his mind. A knight had disarmed him, knocking his sword away. As he fell to his knees, blood spilling from his mouth, the knight, recognized by his red hair and golden armor, declared Ghislain's demise. This knight, known as the noble Idun, was one of the 7 strongest men on the continent. Idun announced the war's conclusion with a tone of finality. He pointed his sword at Ghislain and asked if the defeated man had any final words. Gasping for breath, Ghislain expressed regret for not being able to achieve his revenge, but defiantly stated that he hoped Idun would meet his own end. Idun smiled at this, dismissing it with scorn and calling Ghislain an arrogant fool. He revealed that he had not expected Ghislain to be the eldest son of the fallen Perdium family and reminded him of how he had abandoned his family after his sister's death. This revelation surprised Ghislain, leading him to question how Idun, a man from another kingdom, could know such details. Idun brushed off Ghislain's astonishment, explaining that he had worked hard to track him down. With a sinister grin, Idun disclosed that he and his allies had conspired with the Delphine household to bring about the downfall of the Perdium family. Ghislain was taken aback by this admission, shocked to discover that Duke Delphine's household had not acted independently. Idun moved his sword closer to Ghislain's neck, stating that there was no need for further explanations. As Ghislain faced his impending death, he insisted that he would not accept his fate. Filled with rage, he vowed to never forgive Idun. Unfazed by Ghislain's defiance, Idun delivered a swift blow, decapitating him in one stroke. The scene then shifted to the present, where Ghislain stumbled towards a barrel of water. Looking into its reflection, he confirmed that his head was still attached. Confused, he struggled to make sense of what had happened, questioning whether he was hallucinating. As he looked around, he noticed he appeared much younger than he remembered. Suspicion arose as he wondered if he had been captured and subjected to experiments by mages. Determined to seek revenge if that were the case, he scanned the area and spotted a sword next to the barrel. While lost in thought, he heard a voice calling him, "Young master." A figure entered the tent, urging him to come outside, claiming he knew Ghislain was awake. The man, a soldier named Ricardo from the Perdium household, stepped closer. Before he could react, Ghislain moved behind him and pressed the sword to his neck. Startled, Ricardo froze as Ghislain warned him that his life depended on how truthfully he answered his questions. Ricardo, still addressing Ghislain as young master, retorted that he was overstepping. Ghislain was taken aback by Ricardo's casual attitude despite the threat and demanded an explanation. With surprising nonchalance, Ricardo pushed Ghislain back and mentioned that he had exhausted himself earlier with a tantrum before falling asleep. He reminded Ghislain of his earlier outburst about wanting to lead an army raid against the orcs. Ghislain, still struggling to comprehend the situation, accused Ricardo of talking nonsense. Unfazed, Ricardo grabbed a bag and told Ghislain to start packing, mentioning that others were waiting. Ghislain, feeling increasingly anxious, inquired about their destination. As Ricardo walked past him, he revealed that they were headed to the Perdium estate. Shocked by this information, Ghislain seized Ricardo and demanded to know if he was referring to the ruined Perdium estate. The scene changed again, and Ghislain found himself standing on a cliff, staring at the estate in the distance. It was unmistakably the Perdium estate, but he was puzzled as to why it looked untouched. He distinctly remembered it being reduced to ashes the last time he saw it, yet now it appeared immaculate. Ricardo approached Ghislain and asked if he was having a nightmare, expressing disbelief that Ghislain would call the Perdium household fallen and warning him that the Count would expel him for such remarks. Despite Ricardo's reassurances, Ghislain remained skeptical about his surroundings. Thinking he might be dreaming, he pinched his cheek to check. The sharp pain confirmed to him that everything was real. Seeing his youthful reflection and the estate in perfect condition, Ghislain realized he had somehow gone back in time. Memories of his younger self flooded back, filled with resentment towards his family. His immaturity, stemming from feelings of inadequacy, had led to conflict and estrangement from them. Eventually, the criticism became too much, and he left home. Years later, he fought through numerous battles as a mercenary, sharpening his skills and earning a respected title. With his reputation established, Ghislain returned to his homeland, determined to rectify his past mistakes. By that time, his home had been reduced to nothing but ashes. Now, standing before his family's flag atop a camp, Ghislain felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Everything he had lost, his estate, and the people he loved, was still intact. Overcome with emotion, he laughed uncontrollably, teetering on the brink of madness, and fought the impulse to break into song. However, this moment of joy was short-lived. Ghislain remembered Ricardo's earlier mention of their mission, a raid on the orcs. His thoughts immediately drifted to the disastrous raid from his past life, the day when most of the squad perished. In that previous life, Ghislain had joined the raid to make a name for himself, believing reports that there were only 3 orcs, which led him to underestimate the threat. Lacking experience in leadership, he had insisted on leading the squad. When they encountered over 20 orcs instead, the result was catastrophic, with nearly everyone losing their lives. Determined not to repeat that mistake, Ghislain resolved to approach the orcs with a strategic mindset. Although orcs were not particularly clever, their sheer strength made them dangerous. His main concern was gaining the trust of the soldiers who saw him as a useless failure. Lost in thought, Ghislain was suddenly jolted back to reality by a loud crash. A wooden guard post flew through the air, landing heavily in front of him. A soldier screamed, warning the others of the orcs' arrival. Chaos ensued as the men rushed to take defensive positions. Ghislain's heart sank. The orcs had arrived earlier than they had in his past life. He watched in horror as the beasts tore through the soldiers, their massive weapons and hulking forms overwhelming the defenders. Amid the chaos, a man in blue armor shouted for the soldiers to form ranks. Scoven, the leader of the raid squad, urged everyone to stay calm and form a defensive line. As he approached an orc, the creature swung its enormous weapon at him. Scoven barely managed to block the attack with his sword, but the situation quickly worsened. He realized that the squad had been ambushed and was unprepared, with far more orcs than they had anticipated. While Scoven was trying to process the chaos, a voice warned him of an impending threat. An orc was looming behind him, ready to strike. Just before the blow could hit, someone pushed Scoven out of the way. It was Ghislain, who positioned himself between the commander and the orc. Scoven was shocked to see his young master there. As the orc's axe came down, Ghislain reacted quickly, stabbing the creature's hand and severing its fingers with his sword. Without hesitation, he followed up with a precise cut to its thigh, injuring the beast and stopping its advance. The soldiers, along with Scoven, stood in disbelief as the orc screamed in pain and fell. However, Ghislain was not satisfied with his attack. He quickly recognized his limitations, particularly his inability to use mana, which put him at a disadvantage. Frustration welled up inside him as he regretted not having returned to the past sooner. Turning to Scoven, Ghislain made an unexpected request. The commander, taken aback, asked for clarification. With unwavering confidence, Ghislain asked to take command of the squad.